At 11:13 on a Thursday night, a woman lies in bed with her phone 6 inches from her face and buys a lamp she did not plan to buy. It is not an outrageous purchase. That is part of the problem. The lamp costs $48. The website says only 3 are left. The photos are warm and cinematic. In the images, the lamp is not really a lamp. It is a better corner, a calmer room, a cleaner life, a more intentional version of the person scrolling. She taps once for the color, once for the payment method already saved, once to confirm. Done. 30 seconds. No walk to a store. No need to stand in line. No cash leaving a hand. No real interruption between wanting and owning. A week later, the lamp arrives. It is fine, not life-changing, not terrible, just one more thing. That is how a lot of people lose financial margin now. Not through dramatic recklessness, through systems designed to make spending frictionless and saving feel inconvenient. This is the deeper truth behind a lot of minimalist money habits. Minimalists are not always better people. They are not necessarily more disciplined in the heroic sense. Often they are simply better designers of behavior. They understand something that changes everything once you see it clearly. Human beings rarely do the thing that is best in theory. They do the thing that is easiest in the moment. So if spending is easier than saving, spending wins. If buying takes one tap and saving takes planning, delay, transfers, mental arithmetic, and a little self-control after a long day, then, of course, money disappears. Not because you are broken, because your environment has picked a side. That is why one of the smartest financial systems you can ever build is simple enough to sound almost insulting. Create friction for spending. Create ease for saving. Do that well, and financial margin starts growing almost automatically. Fail to do it, and even a decent income can feel strangely temporary, as if money arrives already tired and leaves before it ever gets a chance to rest. Financial margin is one of the most underrated forms of wealth. It is the gap between what comes in and what your life consumes. It is the difference between surviving the month and controlling it. It is the breathing room that lets an unexpected bill stay inconvenient instead of becoming destabilizing. It is the cash that turns a broken appliance, a delayed paycheck, a travel emergency, or a bad week from a crisis into a problem with a solution. Now, most people say they want more margin. Fewer actually build the conditions that allow it, because they approach money as a morality story instead of a behavioral one. They think the goal is to become the kind of person who simply says no more often, more disciplined, more restrained, more resistant, more mature. That sounds admirable. It also fails constantly in real life because willpower is a terrible daily operating system. Willpower is strongest in theory, weakest at 9:40 p.m. After a draining day when the phone is glowing, the card is full, the bank card is stored, and the mind wants relief disguised as a purchase. Minimalist systems work better because they do not ask the tired version of you to be a hero. They assume the tired version of you will exist, and they design around that fact. This is where the entire topic opens up. Minimalism, in its most useful financial form, is not mainly about owning fewer beige objects or turning your home into a showroom for restraint. It is about reducing the number of pathways through which money can leak. It is about making impulse harder, making awareness cleaner, and making the financially protective action simpler than the financially destructive one. That is a behavioral system. And behavioral systems beat motivational speeches almost every time. Think about the average spending environment for a modern adult. Cards saved everywhere, shopping apps with notifications, one-click ordering, buy now, pay later options sitting beside checkout like a smiling accomplice, sale countdowns, free shipping thresholds designed to make you spend more in order to feel like you spent wisely, recommendation feeds trained on your attention, subscriptions renewing in the background, digital wallets removing the sensory pain of payment, social media converting boredom into desire every 12 seconds. That environment has been engineered with care, not to help you think, to help you move, quickly, emotionally, before the wiser part of your brain has time to arrive. Now compare that with saving. Saving often asks you to log in somewhere less entertaining, move money to a place that gives no immediate dopamine, delay gratification without public applause, and trust that future stability is worth sacrificing present novelty. One side comes with color, urgency, and convenience. The other comes with patience, invisibility, and abstraction. So the question is not why people struggle. The question is why anyone expects them not to. Once you see that clearly, the solution becomes less moral and more architectural. You do not need to become a saint. You need to rearrange the path of least resistance. Make saving the default. Make spending slightly annoying. That tiny reversal creates enormous long-term differences. Start with the first principle. What is easy gets repeated. If money lands in your checking account and just sits there, fully available, it will eventually start looking like spending money, even if part of it is supposed to become savings. Availability changes perception. The brain does not label dollars with philosophical nuance. It reacts to what feels reachable. If the money is visible, liquid, and one tap away from becoming shoes, takeout, decor, gadgets, or upgrades, then your future goals are constantly being asked to win a fight against present temptation. That is not a fair fight. So minimalists who build margin do something deceptively simple. They move money away from themselves fast. Not away forever, away from casual reach. Savings transfers happen automatically, often right after income arrives, before the money has time to become emotionally claimed. Emergency funds live in a separate account. Investment contributions leave without ceremony. Sinking funds exist for irregular costs. The point is not complexity, the point is distance. Because distance creates clarity. Money that remains mixed together becomes mentally available for everything. Money that gets assigned quickly becomes harder to casually betray. This is why so many financially stable people appear calmer even when their incomes are ordinary. They are not necessarily earning dramatically more. Their system is just preventing each paycheck from entering a chaotic open field where every category of desire can attack it at once. The second principle is even more important. The moment before spending matters more than the lecture after spending. Most people try to fix their finances downstream. They analyze statements after the month is already damaged. They feel guilt after the purchase is made. They promise next month will be different. Sometimes they download a budgeting app in a brief burst of self-correction. But behavior is usually won or lost earlier than that. It is won at the point of friction. Does buying take effort, or does it glide? Can you purchase in 10 seconds? Or do you have to stand up, find the card, re-enter the number, or wait? Can you check out instantly, or do you hit a delay that gives your more rational mind a chance to speak? That gap is not trivial. It is where a huge percentage of unnecessary spending either survives or dies. This is why one of the most effective minimalist money moves is also one of the least glamorous. Delete stored payment information. Remove shopping apps from your phone. Unsubscribe from promotional emails. Turn off one-click ordering. Log out after use. Do not carry every card everywhere. Make the purchase take longer than the emotion, because the emotion is often brief. A lot of spending urges are weather systems, not truths. They arrive strong, persuasive, and temporary. If the environment lets those urges become transactions in seconds, your money becomes vulnerable to every passing mood. If the environment forces even a small pause, many urges burn out before reaching checkout. That is friction, and friction is underrated because people hear the word and imagine hardship. But this kind of friction is not punishment. It is protection. A speed bump is friction. A locked gate is friction. A moment to think is friction. In money, friction is often the difference between "I want this right now" and "why was I even considering that?" Minimalists understand this intuitively. They reduce browsing. They reduce exposure. They avoid turning entertainment into shopping. They do not only buy less, they place fewer opportunities for mindless acquisition inside the rhythm of ordinary life. That matters because exposure drives desire more than most people admit. You do not crave what you do not keep presenting to your nervous system. If your lunch break is part social media, part product discovery, part cart building, then spending is no longer an event. It becomes a hobby with shipping notifications. That is financially lethal over time. So the minimalist system is not only about saying no, it is about encountering fewer yes moments in the first place. This leads to the third principle: make saving emotionally visible. One reason spending wins is that its feedback is immediate. You see the package, you feel the novelty, you touch the upgraded object. Saving often feels like subtraction with no scene attached to it. Money leaves the checking account and disappears into something quiet and abstract. That silence is useful financially, but psychologically it can make the habit feel dull and thankless. The solution is not to make saving dramatic. It is to make it legible. People are more likely to repeat a behavior when they can see progress. That may mean giving savings categories names that matter. Emergency buffer, 6-month runway, new laptop fund, freedom account, moving option, car replacement, trip to see family, tax cushion. It may mean checking progress once a week rather than obsessively. It may mean watching debt balances shrink or investment contributions rise. The behavior becomes stronger when the brain can connect the transfer to an actual form of protection or possibility. Minimalists tend to be good at this because they are often less interested in having everything and more interested in not being trapped. That is an important distinction. They do not save only for some vague future richness. They save for lightness, for room, for optionality, for the ability to absorb life without panic. That kind of goal is emotionally stronger than generic advice to be responsible. The fourth principle is critical and often ignored. Reduce the number of spending decisions your day contains. A cluttered financial life creates more chances to fail. More stores followed, more tabs open, more notifications, more subscriptions, more apps, more little treats, more browsing, more errands that accidentally turn into purchases, more categories of desire activated every week. The more often you are asked to resist, the worse your odds become. Minimalist money systems work in part because they simplify the battlefield. Fewer stores visited recreationally, fewer sites checked out of boredom, and fewer categories of stuff treated as entertainment, fewer subscriptions draining cash invisibly, fewer style identities to maintain, fewer upgrades, fewer just-in-case purchases, less ambient temptation. This is not deprivation, it is decision reduction. And decision reduction is one of the most powerful forms of financial design, because every unnecessary decision is a place where impulse can hide. If your groceries are roughly standardized, your clothing is more intentional, your home categories are clearer, and your spending rules are simpler, then money behavior gets quieter. Quieter behavior compounds better. Chaos is expensive. Midway through all of this, it helps to reframe the goal. The real aim is not simply to save more. The aim is to stop requiring constant self-control in order to behave wisely. That is a huge difference. Anyone can behave well for a week with enough motivation. The question is whether your system behaves well when you are tired, distracted, stressed, celebrating, bored, lonely, overworked, underslept, or slightly envious of someone else's lifestyle. That is the real test. If the system collapses the moment you feel human, then it is not a good system. Minimalists often build margin because they accept that truth early. They do not trust motivation to manage recurring money behavior. They build rails, transfers happen automatically, bills are separated, spending accounts are finite, temptations are removed from the phone, wants wait before being bought. Fixed costs stay low enough that margin exists before discipline even enters the room. That last part may be the most important of all. Behavioral systems matter, but they become much more powerful when fixed costs are reasonable. If housing, transportation, debt, and recurring bills consume nearly everything, then no amount of app deletion will fully solve the problem. Minimalists tend to understand this too. They know that the cleanest financial habit is often not a habit at all, but a structural choice made once. Cheaper housing, fewer financed upgrades, less identity wrapped around possessions, Lower baseline consumption. That is margin before tactics. Then the tactics protect it. This is why creating friction for spending and ease for saving is not one trick. It is a layered system. Money arrives and gets assigned quickly. Savings leave automatically. Spending accounts have natural limits. Temptation is kept slightly inconvenient. Exposure to shopping is reduced. Wants wait long enough to survive the mood that created them. Progress is visible enough to feel meaningful. Fixed costs do not crush the entire structure from above. At that point, financial margin stops depending on who you are in the most motivated version of yourself. It starts depending on the design of the environment you live inside. That is powerful because environments are repeatable, and repeatability is what wealth needs. It is also worth noticing something subtle here. Friction for spending does not mean making life miserable. It means making unplanned, low-value, emotionally driven spending slower than planned, useful, aligned spending. If you need groceries, buy groceries. If your shoes are worn out, replace them. If your laptop is failing and you work on it, solve the problem. The friction is not meant to obstruct life. It is meant to interrupt leakage. Minimalists are not usually trying to turn every purchase into a courtroom trial. They are trying to reserve speed for necessities and require thought for everything else. That balance matters. So does self-knowledge. Everyone has their weak points. Some people overspend when they are stressed, some when they are bored, some when they are feeling deprived, some when they get paid, some when they compare their lives to other people's. A good behavioral system is personal enough to target those patterns. If late-night scrolling leads to shopping, remove shopping from the phone. If weekends create aimless browsing, plan environments that do not revolve around stores. If social comparison triggers upgrades, and reduce exposure to the feeds that generate false dissatisfaction. If convenience spending explodes when life gets hectic, automate meals, routines, or recurring purchases in smarter ways. The system works best when it meets your actual life instead of some imaginary disciplined person's life. That is another minimalist strength. They often stop trying to maintain a fantasy self. Their money systems are more realistic, more edited, and less dependent on emotional performance, and that realism is a financial asset. Because margin, once built, starts changing everything. You stop needing every month to go perfectly. A surprise expense is still annoying, but it is not identity-shaking. You start making decisions from thought rather than urgency. You stop reaching for credit to solve every awkward gap. You can wait longer, negotiate better, recover faster. You are less vulnerable to advertising because not every desire feels immediately actionable. The home gets calmer. The accounts get stronger. The future stops feeling like a distant lecture and starts feeling like something you are steadily constructing. That is the quiet reward of a well-designed system. Not just more money, less drama. Go back to the woman in bed buying the lamp in 30 seconds. That moment only happened because the environment was prepared for it. The card was stored. The ad found her. The checkout was frictionless. The desire did not have to survive daylight, movement, or thought. It only had to survive one thumb. Now imagine the opposite system. The app is not on the phone. The payment details are not saved. The item goes on a list instead of into a cart. And savings were already transferred earlier that day. The spending account is finite. The urge has to last until tomorrow. Maybe it does. Often it does not. That is how financial margin is built in ordinary lives. Not usually through a single grand sacrifice. Through small design decisions repeated long enough that money starts flowing toward protection instead of leakage. Create friction for spending. Create ease for saving. That is not a slogan. It is a behavioral advantage. And once it becomes the architecture of your life, the results stop looking like discipline alone. They start looking like what they really are. A system that finally knows which side it is on.